we finished actually the chapter 26, and we're on to chapter 27, and we're on to 28. And the subject of 28 it's a continuation of the previous chapters. It's a continuation of the Alter Rebbe's message, rather, of one being down-spirited because of spiritual problems that he has. Not so much problems associated with the material, but rather the spiritual. So Alter Rebbe went through different levels or different dimensions or different types of problems one could have. Spiritual problems one could have which could bring his spirit down. One, he said that people many times they feel this they're down-spirited as a result of their past sins, which they know their past in which they sins which they which were deliberately, advertently done by them. It's their baggage. People are concerned of their spiritual baggage, or baggage their baggage which has an effect on their spiritual status in their relationship, in the context of their relationship with God. And especially someone knows what the gravity of sin is all about, and they have baggage behind them which is not pretty at all. And they're worried about it, they're concerned about it, and it could bring a person down, depression, to a state of depression, state of melancholy, and namely, their spirits come down as a result, and that does not work well for a person which has to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yitas Hashem b'simcha. One has to serve God with joy and elation, and only an upbeat spirit. As we said, this is a crucial prerequisite, or a crucial condition of man being successful in his Avodas Hashem. So Alter Rebbe tackles that and deals with that, and how we're supposed to deal with that, and how that is not a reason for a person to be down-spirited. Then he goes on, he says that, and again, in the context of spiritual problems, he began with material problems, but then he says in the context of spiritual problems, the latter is what he deals with. And then he goes on, he says, what about that the person is down-spirited not because of past sins, but because his challenges, his preoccupation, his concern of his ongoing challenges, doesn't know how to put himself, where to position himself. He's concerned, he's worried, he feels the contradiction in his life. Sometimes he's in the synagogue, in the Beis HaMedrash, he feels he's in love with God. He steps outside, he has other challenges, he's inclined to other things which he has to fight with. He doesn't know how to put it in what perspective to put it in, if he doesn't put it in a right perspective, his ongoing challenges, it could be definitely devastating, or at least bring the person's spirit down, which is, again, does not work well with this important condition of a Yid being only able, as we mentioned, a Yid could only be successful in the service to God only when he stands with in a state of joy and elation. Simcha v'tuv levav, gladness of heart, in order that the person has to be upbeat, in order to triumph over the Yetzer Hara, because it works like a catch-22. The Yetzer Hara brings the person down. Again, as we expanded on this notion in different perspectives and point of views throughout the last few chapters, because in the end of the day, that's the best way for the Yetzer Hara to catch someone. He brings the spirit down, then he's like, pretty much in his net. And we have to make sure that we always stand with Simcha v'tuv levav, in order simply to be successful with our Yetzer Hara, to triumph over the Yetzer Hara. So Alter Rebbe deals with that, puts things in perspective, and tells the person that should not interfere with your Simcha, with your joy. In the 22nd, in 28th chapter, the Alter Rebbe deals with a similar problem, that the person is challenged with negative thoughts, but not in the exclusivity of Chavches of chapter 28, is not, the Alter Rebbe deals with this issue when the person is challenged with negative thoughts, when he's learning Torah and when he's praying. This in the beginning, or towards the beginning of 27, the Alter Rebbe deals with the challenges which one has when he's out there dealing or engaging in his worldly affairs, In chapter 28, Alter Rebbe sets a separate chapter which deals with different inappropriate or thoughts which are challenging thoughts in the context of one's alignment with the way Hashem wants thoughts to be or not to be, or in other words, to stay away from, to not chas v'shalom that any impure thoughts should enter a person's mind precisely, throughout the entire day, but it should not interfere with his learning and davening. And what if they do? So the Alter Rebbe sets a separate chapter which speaks about the struggle of one with his thoughts. And again, as we mentioned a few times, the difference is action, speech, and thoughts. Speech, if I don't have to say something, it could be sometimes tempting to say something, but I know I'm not supposed to. I just close my mouth and I hold it closed, despite the difficulty or the effort needs to be made in order for me to maintain a pure speech, or speech which is 100% aligned with where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants speech to be. But when it comes to thought is mishotetet tamid, it's constantly flowing. That's where the real challenge is. And therefore and since in chapter 28, the Alter Rebbe speaks about these challenges which come, these thoughts which come in precisely when the person is learning Torah, or precisely when the person is praying. As opposed to, again, chapter 27 is general throughout the entire day. Here, as we know it, sometimes it's they say they say the story of this individual which they were trying to deal with a certain complicated issue. So one guy says to the group, you want to know how to deal with this issue, you want to unfold the codes, or you want to just to come to a clear conclusion, or let me fill you in. He said, give me a few moments, I'm going to go daven mincha. When I start davening, suddenly all the different thoughts come in, and probably this will bring clarity to the subject. So give me a few minutes, I'll daven mincha, and then we'll come back with my comments on the matter, which is so further. There's nothing further than the truth, because usually when we experience in the middle of prayer, middle of learning, certain scenes and scenarios which we were in the dark prior to our prayer and our learning, and suddenly it comes to light, and the picture looks picture perfect. Oh, that's the solution. Finish Shemona Esrei, finish praying. You'll see that you'll remain in the dark, because nothing. There's no resolution. Nothing becomes truly clear when you pray. Quite on the contrary, these thoughts of, so to say, clarity and so many issues come to. It appears to be so when we daven and we learn Torah, because that's one of the tactics of the Yetzer Hara, to come in forcefully into your mind and present clarities in every other subject other than what you're meant to be doing, which is again learning Torah and praying. But sometimes it works, and this is again part of the tactic of the Yetzer Hara, which tries to override us. It's it puts us in different. We start davening Shemoneh Esrei, before we know it, by the end we were just in so many different places, and so to say important places. The famous story of this individual that he comes and he starts davening Shemoneh Esrei, and then after a while they hear him saying, "Who are you?" They hear him saying, "Who are you?" They say, "Who are?" People try to intervene, or people themselves they didn't understand what he's saying, and he was just asking, "Who are you?" Because he was in the city of Leipzig. Leipzig was a industrial city, and suddenly he feels somebody banging on his chest, and he turns around and says, "Who's banging on my chest?" He didn't see anybody, and he says, "Who's banging on my chest?" And then he noticed after a while that he started out in Shemoneh Esrei, and suddenly he was totally in Leipzig, in this industrial zone, selling in the marketplace, and he was just so accustomed to saying the words in Shemoneh Esrei, and part of it is Slach Lonu. Middle of Shemoneh Esrei we do Slach Lonu Hashem Gavini Ki Chatonu Machel Makini Ki Fashonu. He was doing it himself, but he forgot that he was in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei. He was like in Leipzig, coming crossing certain important deals, and suddenly he felt someone's banging on his chest. That, as we know it, that's how powerful the Yitzhara comes in, brings us, take us over, and bring us in different area. Before we know it, there's a shalom, and there goes our Shemon Esrei. So this is problem. These are problems. These are spiritual problems, which the kosher, sincere Jew has, and how does he deal with it? Again, this is enough reason to bring a person's spirit down. Enough of a reason to make the person a bit ba'atzvus, this state of easy to bring a person to state of melancholy as a result of he's learning Torah and he's davening and precisely then he's overtaken by these thoughts. Now it goes further, because sometimes inappropriate thoughts sometimes come into a person's mind precisely when he's involved in learning and davening, which that's even more tormenting and more challenging. And again, more reason to bring a person's spirit down. So how does it deal with this? So this is again a separate chapter which the Alter Rebbe deals with the thought, the difficulties which we have with our machshavah, the alien thoughts which come into our mind precisely when we're learning Torah and we're davening. So let's see the text inside. Even it falls into the person's mind thoughts of illustrious thoughts which are temptatious, thoughts which are associated with taivus, with lust and temptation, as in thoughts which are temptatious to the person, and again in purely things which are inappropriate to think, but again hirurim of taivus, things which are easy or have or flow because of their connection. In other words, because of the taivus, because of the temptation which are associated with these thoughts, therefore they easily flow into the person's mind. And he says, it doesn't have to be machshavah, they read taivus, thoughts which are alien thoughts. Alien means it's not the place. It's not the place to think about a deal in Leipzig when you're in the middle of talking to God. And we notice that it comes in the middle of Shemoneh, in the middle of learning Torah, in the middle of davening. And the person is trying to daven the kavanah. It's not that he's just formally letting loose and utilizing the time of prayer to deal with all his different important thoughts that he has to deal with. No, he's davening b'kavanah, but it comes in. And it comes in, it could be really, really bothered. But to the sincere Jew, it's bothersome. It can bring a person's spirit down. What do we do about it? The Alter Rebbe says, Al Yashis Leiv Aleim. Don't pay attention to it. Al Yasir Daitem En Kiroga. Avert your mind. Divert your mind from it. Just jump away from it. Kirega in a moment. Va'al Yisheita Las. In other words, momentary. Don't even pay any attention to it. Va'al Yisheita Lalis Lasik Ba'Las Hamidus Shel Machshava Zara Kineda. This is a separate subject which is dealt with in a number of svarim in Kabbalah, in Musar, in again these are based on Pnimiyas HaTorah, the inner dimensions and the esoteric part of Torah, namely Kabbalah and Zeir, which speaks about a certain idea of halos hamidus shel hamachshava zara, which means any thought come from the emotional faculties from man. Emotions produce thoughts. Emotions lead to the person to think about something. And if a person has an alien thought, it comes from the midah. There's a corruption in the midah. There's a corruption in the emotional faculty. I'm saying this very brief. So a number of places it says that once you elevate the emotional dimension or these emotions to a higher level, that extinguishes or that eliminates the alien thought. So when a person has these machshavas zaris, he's going to start thinking, let me start working on it. He's in the middle of davening out to chedul adam das. He comes into different these alien thoughts. He's going to go ahead and do this whole service which is called halas hamidus shel machshavas zara. Again, there's a lot said about this the explanation to this, but we're just giving this very much. We're just saying this very much in brief. But the reason why there could be a machshava zara, because there is a bilbul. In other words, the emotional faculties are not in the right place. And again, because emotions produce thoughts or lead to thoughts, and therefore the emotions are not in the right levels, in the right synchronized. They're not synchronized right. So the person wants to be maile. In other words, they elevate the status of the midah in order to eliminate the machshava zara, this inappropriate thought or this alien thought. Dr. Rebbe says it's not for you, Mr. Beinani. He said this is only speaks about tzaddikim, which it's not their alien thoughts fall into their mind. Others' alien thoughts fall into their mind because they're tzaddikim. There are people which represent or stand behind or the basis of Jews in Yiddishkeit or Yidden Jews throughout the entire world, and therefore they're affected by the alien thoughts of others, and they're here precisely regarding them is where there's the suggestions of this halas, the elevation of the midot. But Mr. Beinani, the Alter Rebbe says, Mishanefele Mishalei, when you have these alien thoughts coming to you in the middle of your learning, in the middle of your davening, and this is coming directly, not from anybody else, but it's coming from you. From the evil which exists in your heart and in the left compartment of the heart, the left domain of the heart. As we know, again, the Alter Rebbe classifies the Beinani, even though someone never sins, because if he sins, he's not a Beinani. Even if he sins, not only in action and speech, but even in thought, he's called a Rasha. But at the same token, as much as he's a Beinani, which someone who doesn't sin, his Yitzhar Hara, meaning his evil inclination, his animal soul, is fully intact. The moment the Yitzhar Hara is transformed, then he's becoming a tzaddik. Again, any of the multiple levels of tzaddikim. But here you're dealing with a Beinani. The Beinani, again, one of the definitions of the Beinani is Yitzhar Hara, his nefesh bahamis, his animal soul is completely and fully intact, and therefore this is where the machshava zara, this is where the alien thought is coming from. It's coming from you, Beinani, from the evil which exists within your heart. So, how could you elevate it above hu atzmi if you yourself are essentially, virtually, mekusher lamato, you are connected below. So don't do that whole service of Allah's amidos, of the machshava zara, because that's a different service which is pertinent to tzaddikim, again, based on what he said over here. And again, there's broader explanations in this matter, but this is it in a nutshell. So don't do that. Your service is just dump it and go on with your prayer. But yet, in the same token, even I want to do that, I want to dump it, but it's coming back to me so frequently, and again, sometimes precisely when I'm learning Torah, and precisely when I'm praying. So the Alter Rebbe says, let me tell you what's really happening over here. And basically what the Alter Rebbe is going to say over here is something very interesting. The reason why when we pray or we learn Torah, that precisely then these alien thoughts come to mind is because in the end of the day, these are two souls fighting over the same territory. And the territory, the Ir Ktana, like it says in a number of places, based on the verse, even Ir Ktana, Zeh Ha'odam, it says this small city, which this is man, which both souls are trying to override or overtake, conquer. Man, that man should submit itself to the message of each, and again, each one wants that man should submit himself to their message, to their authority. So could you imagine when you have a neutral territory, there's a king on both sides, and again a monarch, a whole, the king in a kingdom with his empire on both sides of this neutral territory, and they all want to conquer it. You have in the Far East, without mentioning names, there's different. Or say Far East, the famous cities, even between India and Pakistan. There's other places as well. There's neutral territory. Today you find between many countries are fighting over this island or this territory, and it's a territory which each one wants to dominate, and it wants to make it part of its system and its empire, and the currency, everything should be under its flag. So as long as one king is not jumping for it, Sometimes the other king, as much as he has a temptation to have the complete authority over it, but there are times because one monarch is not jumping for it, the other one would stay calm. And the same thing vice versa. When does one come in and aggressively demonstrate its interest and aggressively does everything it can to conquer this neutral land, is when the other party jumps into the picture and wants to take over. That would entice party number two, or the other king, to want to go ahead and fight and battle and a fierceful battle, in order not to allow the other emperor, the other king, the other entity, and the other force to take over. And the Alter Rebbe says this is exactly what's happening when a person learns Torah, namely when he davens to Hashem, when he sets aside to exercise and execute his soul relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Nefesh Elikis, what's happening is that the Nefesh Elikis, the godly, when a person, precisely when he's davening, the godly soul is coming into the picture and wants to take over every single part of the person's, of every single part, and every single faculty of the person. And the mind should think about God, and the heart should feel about God, and the thought should focus on God. And the speech is obvious. He's davening, so speech is a godly speech, and his action is his whole posture, his whole being is in a state of complete submission towards God. It says because of that, because of the Nefesh Elikis, the godly souls right now jumps in and wants to take over the entire body, that it should be completely submissive to God via the Nefesh Elikis, via the godly soul. That entices the animal soul and says, hold it. You're jumping in, you really want to take over this entity, the person, this small city, which is the person, which is the body, or all faculties of man. That's when he jumps in aggressively. As long as the person is not learning Torah, not davening, obviously the Nefesh Bahamis periodically gets a kick out of getting the person under his flag. But where does an animal soul feel threatened? Sometimes it's precisely when the person is learning Torah, and more so when he's davening. Because you want to take over, you're jumping in, you want to take over every part of this man, every part of this yid, every part of this irktan, of this city, to be under your mashma'at, which means under your influence, under your flag. That's when the animal soul feels threatened, and it'll jump in fiercely, not to allow the godly soul to take over. And he said that's the reason why, precisely when you start davening, then so many negative thoughts come in, or alien thoughts at least. When you start learning, it starts happening as well, much more than when you're not learning and davening. So the Alter Rebbe says, once I dissect to you what's really going on, once I explain to you what's really going on, what are you so sad about? That you started davening and suddenly an animal soul started sending its signals. What do you expect? It feels threatened, it feels challenged, because the godly soul is taking over the whole situation over here. So once you know that it's two separate souls and each one feels threatened precisely when you're starting to learn Torah, or the animal soul feels threatened precisely when you're starting to learn Torah, because the godly soul is really kind of taking over, or namely precisely when you're davening, as Dr. Rebbe explained, that the greatest transformation even in the life of the Beinoni, to think and be and feel godliness, or to feel godliness, to think in a godly manner, and to uplift itself in a godly status, is precisely by davening. So the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul, feels very threatened precisely when a person starts davening. That's when he comes in so forcefully. So what are you sad about? You know exactly how it works. That when things are neutral, the animal soul will jump in periodically, but not so fierceful. Why are you having these alien thoughts precisely when you're learning, or namely when you're davening? Is because you're davening, because you're learning Torah. Or again, namely when you're davening. So once you put it in perspective, what's the point to be sad? There's no point to be sad. You know exactly how it works. When one wants to take over, like we just gave an example, when two monarchs are two sides of a neutral territory, which each one has an interest at it under its auspices. When no one jumps in, they could kind of live with the fact that it just remains neutral. The moment one king would jump in, want to take over, that entices the other one to do everything he can not to lose this territory. So the same thing, Alter Rebbe says, so there's no point of being sad. The Alter Rebbe says, if it was one soul which is davening, and the same soul which is thinking these alien thoughts, there's a point to be sad. But if it's two separate souls, and the reason why it's happening precisely when you're davening, or even when you're learning Torah, is because the godly soul is in full measurement. In other words, it's expressing itself with its full measurement and its full in executing all its strength in order to conquer, to take over the Adam, the Irktana, the small city, which means all man's faculties. That's the reason why the animal soul is jumping in so fierceful. Once you know that, just continue davening and do everything you have to do, and you could maintain the simcha, because there's no reason to feel bad, because it's all clear what's really happening. So let's see it in the text over here. It says, don't fall. Your heart should not fall within yourself, which means don't feel down. To be sad and shame in the time of your service. When again, virtually you must be b'simcha rabba. Like we said, that's the only way you could triumph over Yetzer Hara, is when you stand with a simcha, not only a joy, but simcha rabba, with a great joy. But don't feel bad. Don't let that great joy, which is so crucial for you to triumph over the Yetzer Hara, to be successful in your learning and davening in every part of your BAYT, to be taken over by this hard feeling of what you're experiencing in the middle of davening. He says, quite on the contrary, he's chazik Yosef, strengthen yourself more. Yosef it's an increased intensity with all your strength, with your intention of your davening, you say it with greater joy and greater relation, when you pay attention and you realize what's going on, that where this alien thought which comes into you, that comes from the klipa, which means the impure forces which reside in the left compartment of your heart, which constantly makes war, and again demonstrates itself with war, with fierce fighting in the life of the Beinani, even after with its godly soul. Again, that's the difference of the Beinani and the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik has transformed its nefesh ba'amis, its animal soul. So if it's transformed, it becomes not an enemy, it becomes an ally. And in this case of the Beinani, it's not an ally yet. That's why he's still a Beinani. In other words, nefesh ba'amis is still intact. So it is making war. In other words, it's expressing itself with war with its godly soul. And we know the way of people who fight, those who battle or those who combat each other. Those who the right word, how do you say mishu ne'evak, battle or it's very clear in the term we're using, but just looking for the exact word of okay, it'll come to mind. Those who battle with each other, or those who fight with each other. When one strengthens himself, precisely when one demonstrates extra strength, that elicits by the other to as well demonstrate extra strength, and tries to give it all he got with all the intensity of his strength. And therefore, at this point, when the nefesh lekis is, when the person is davening, what's transpiring when he's davening? When the godly, so that is the experience of davening. The godly soul strengthens itself and intensifies its efforts to daven. Azai, precisely then, the impure force strengthens itself kinegdo, against the ambition and the presentation or the goal and the objective of the nefesh lekis of the godly soul, le'apila, and to bring the person down b'machshava zara, with an alien thought shala of its own. In other words, the impure forces would send an alien thought in order to disturb this successful davening of the nefesh lekis, or the successful of the person, and the successful influence of the nefesh lekis, which got the person should daven to Hashem with such passion. And that's what he says, not like the error of the world, which err, and they prove For when an alien thought falls in, they say Michlal Shein Filasim Klum. They feel that this is a proof. They find this, and it says a number of places, and even Sifrei Musar, that you have alien thoughts. That is a proof that your prayer is nothing worth. And they say Shilu Yispal Koroi V'Nachin. If you would pray appropriately, is that any alien thoughts would never fall into you. But Al Rebbe says that would be true if only one soul is praying to Hashem. Or in the same soul, the same soul which is thinking and focusing on alien thoughts. It's the same soul. Then you say, well, that's a proof that you're not really davening, you're not really there, and this davening is no good. And then it would be a reason certainly to feel bad. But the truth of the matter is, these are two souls which are battling, which are fighting one with each other. In the mind of man, each one has a desire and each one has a will to govern in it. That the mind, again, which is the main focus of the person's davening, or the main domain which they're fighting over when the person daven, is to mizbein in the godless Hashem, to ponder, to meditate on the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Nefesh Elikis at that time is trying to overcome the mind of man, overtake the mind of man, that it should be memula mimenu levad, it should be full of it. And so therefore, at that time, the other soul wants to again sense its signals, its alien thoughts, that it should be full of something which is again the antithesis of the godly presentation, and the antithesis of the godly message. And again, the godly message, the godly soul wants that the whole mayach, the whole mind should be full of it. And again, its presentation, its godly presentation. All thoughts of Torah, all thoughts of associated with the fear of heaven, again, Yiras Shamayim, come from the godly soul. All worldly matters come from the animal soul. Actually, the only thing is the godly soul is invested in the animal soul, and therefore it's always troubled by the animal soul. We mentioned this a few times in the past. One could not say, oh, everything is good by me. When I go daven, I daven with my godly soul. When I sin with my animal soul. There's peace and harmony in my system. No problem. Yeah, it's not so, because the way Hashem created the way Hashem put together, God put together the system, is that the godly soul is invested in the animal soul. Meaning, if the animal soul becomes tainted and dirty, unfortunately, again, as it expresses itself with its animalistic expressions and investments and so on and so forth, that pulls, we learned in the end of chapter Chafei, that pulls. It's like the godly soul is always within an animal soul. Again, that's the way that God put together the system of the human being, or system of the Yid. So when the animal soul acts animalistic and it does things which are totally animalistic, the godly soul is compelled to go along. In other words, it dips the godly soul into its animalistic realities. Now, Rabbi said more so, takes the godly soul, which is a part of God, and puts it in to these animalistic realities, which is again impure, unclean, especially when it crosses into the red line of sin. The Nefesh Elikis becomes very tainted, and the Nefesh Elikis becomes dirty, and it becomes stained, and it becomes blemished, and there is a chisar in it. It's a terrible pain for the Nefesh Elikis, which only wants God and only wants godliness, and it's pulled forcefully, compelled to be in an area which is so antithetical to what it represents. And again, this is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu established the system, that Nefesh Elikis melubeshes ba, and therefore he reacts. How is he supposed to react? He says, imagine mashal adam mispal b'kavana, someone is davening with a kavana, with the right intention, and then he has an orel, a non-Jew, but in this case not just a good non-Jew, which is a respectful non-Jew, someone which is an orel, a rasha, a wicked person, which has one thing in mind: he wants to disturb this person from his concentration in his prayer. So what does he do? He starts talking to him. And what does this person know? Is talking to him and starts dealing or relating this, that, and the other to him. And what's his intention? He just wants to disturb. So what are you going to do? Imagine you stand, some of your middle davening, and this wicked person, and starts trying to avert your mind from your intention, your kavanah satfilah. And he starts talking to you this, that, and the other. You're in the middle of davening, and you know he's disturbing you. The moment you will stop, and you will say, "No, like that, or indicate him to go away. To him it's the same if you go shh, or if you go nu, or if you go could you go away. It's the same thing for him than if you lament the fact that he's bothering you. In other words, what does he want? He doesn't want anything else. He just wants you not to have the right kavanah in davening. So if you're involved in going shh, or you're involved in going nu, or you're involved in doing this, that, and the other, to get his attention, in other words, in order that he should bug off you, he's already 100% successful. Because intention wasn't that you should demonstrate his authority over you, or his dominance over you. You should be humble to his dominance. He has one thing in mind. You should stop davening with kavanah. The moment you turn to him and you give him that attention, you go nu or sh, or whatever it is, that's all he wanted. That you should continue the prayer and in a way that you should say the lip service, the words, and in your but you cease to have the kavanah, because in your kavanah you're saying nu and sha and please move away from me. What does he want? That's all he wants. He wants to divert the person from the divert the person from his kavanah, deviate the person from his kavanah. So if you're saying sha or nu, this is what he wanted. He's 100% successful. And the same thing when it comes to this machshava zara, this inappropriate or this alien thought, what comes into mind. Once you know that is the Russian, that's the nefesh of the animal soul, which feels threatened by the godly soul overtaking your whole system again, because that is what prayer is all about. The godly soul overrides your system, meaning to say that you're thinking about God, you're thinking about godliness. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. V'ahavta, your faculties are totally immersed in godly realities or godly experiences. The nefesh al-Bahamis feels very threatened, so it comes in fiercely and it starts talking to you, starts sending these alien thoughts, because again it doesn't want to, it feels threatened that the godly soul is taking over this middle territory, this neutral territory. And then you, therefore, what do you feel how are you supposed to present as like somebody who's standing in front of you trying to disturb you? What is the suggestion? Don't go say shah, don't go say nu. It's just a reality. You're not pushing him away. He's standing there. You have no right to push him away under the rule of law. You could walk away from him, but you don't. You can't physically push him away. And the same thing when it comes to nefesh bahamis. Don't say shah, don't say nu, don't argue with the nefesh bahamis. Because if you want to win over this individual, again, in the mashal, in the example, if it was a physical person, an arul or rush, a wicked person which wants to disturb your kavanah satfila, the best thing is ignore him and go on. Don't say nu, don't say shah. Because once you do that, exactly as you're doing exactly what he wanted. You just go on with your kavanah. The Alter Rebbe said the same thing over here. The animal soul is he feels threatened, so he's sending the signal, this alien thought. What do you do? Just like again, when it was a physical person, what is the suggestion? Certainly the suggestion is Shalela should be made. Don't answer me, don't say how you doing and what do you think you want and what do you want. And also don't push him away also. Because again, the moment you're taking the time to push him away, you're bringing him 100% success, because he just wants to disturb you from your prayer. So what do you do? You make yourself like a mute. Like someone's deaf, which you can't hear. And same with prayer. Just you focus. How do you say? You focus on the road. You don't deal with anything else. You focus on the road. You focus on the prayer, and you move on. Like it says, Ulekayim. To fulfill what it says in the verse, don't answer the fool with his foolishness, or with his with his foolishness, or his temptation of sin, or temptation to override you and overwin you inappropriately or justifiably. Don't answer, because then tishvele, you're going to equate yourself to him. Because if you answer the fool, you become on the level of the fool. In this case, do not answer. Don't dignify the message of the nefesh bahamis. Once you know what's really happening, don't dignify his signal. And don't answer anything. Shum tainu maina. No respond, no answer. Neged machshava zara, against this alien thought. Do not even deal with it. Don't even dignify it. Because if you'll battle with the menuvel, with the menuvel mean to say this inappropriate, but it's an expression of the disgust energy, or this disgust again presentation of the Nefesh Bahamis misnavel, you are going to be dirtied as well. Mis'abik kol mis'abik menuvel mitnavel. So if you're going to deal with it, even mis'abik, it means you're going to battle it, and you're going to try to override it in a way that you're going to dignify it and again deal with the negativity of this signal, you're going to become dirty yourself. So what do? You should make yourself like you don't know, and you don't hear these thoughts which come into your mind. Just push them away from your mind and continue to increase intensity in the koach, in the focus, and in the energy of your kavanah, of your intent and your prayer. That's the way to go about it. You continue again, like you ignore it. You don't pay attention to it at all. Paying attention is where the Nefesh Bahamis will find itself successful, because you'll pay attention to it, and pay attention to it. If you're going to try to fight it and deal with it, before you know it, you're holding Sim Shalom and Isa Shalom. You lost the whole Shemoneh Esrei. You just go on with your kavanah. Do not dignify it and don't pay attention to it, and that's the only way you'll be successful. Rabbi concludes this chapter. It's famously known. This is a very great, important consolation. Rabbi deals in a very personal issue that sometimes we know that we try so hard. Stand in our prayer, we try so hard to move on with our kavanah. But sometimes the message of the animal soul is so fierceful that it really does not let go. It doesn't let go. As we know it again personally, in the life of the Beinoni, that he davens and he tries and he takes the suggestions very serious, and sometimes he's successful, but sometimes he's not. Because we know sometimes the animal soul comes through so powerful, and the message is so potent, and the animal soul does not let go. He kind of torments our soul when we daven. And what are we supposed to and what are we supposed to do then? So the Rebbe says he's very much aware about this problem. In other words, usually it's not that this is only the ways to go about it just with the ladder, just quite on the contrary. Most of the time, the moment you'll have your focus on the road, which means you'll focus on the prayer, you will see the dissipation of the Nefesh Bahamis. He'll try again, but the moment he knows that you're not even paying attention, back to the example, the moment this individual is Gentile, or he says this Rasha, this wicked person, realizes you're not even dignifying him with a response, that would cause him literally to leave the area, to move away from you. When you go nu and shah, then you're enticing to go further, and especially with an intention is just for you to stop davening. And the moment you're doing so, you're trying to push him away. So again, he just wants to go on throughout all the brachas of Shemoneh Esrei, throughout the entire davening, until the end of davening. Then he's ready. Okay, that's not a problem. I'm ready to leave now. But in the end of the day, you lost your whole davening. That's the wrong way to go about it. But if you don't dignify it, you don't allow it to come into the arena. You just go on focusing on your prayer and let that. Usually, the Nefesh Bahamis steps back and completely dissipates, and at least for the time of the davening, it could try to jump back in, but overall, you could have a successful davening. But sometimes, the Alter Rebbe says, and it happens to every single person periodically, that it comes through so strong, and the Nefesh Bahamis doesn't let go, and he makes that whole scenario of that alien thought so real in your mind, in a way that you're doing blessing after blessing or prayer after prayer, and it just doesn't let go. So the Rebbe says that if that ever happens, you should know this. You should try this. He says, it's extremely difficult for you to push it away from your mind, and because they torment, they bother your mind very much with great strength. So then Alter Rebbe gives you the suggestion: talk to God at the moment. Do a special prayer within your prayer. God, you got to help me with this one. Alleviate the intensity of that negative alien signal. And why would God want to do it for you? Because your soul, which is in this battle, in this fierce battle, because it wants to daven and it wants to allow the conscious mind of the Adam, in other words, this irktana, this neutral territory, to be is submissive and under the authority and under the rulership of it itself, of it as the nefesh halikis, of the godly soul, and again it's experienced this fierceful battle. But we know, what is this godly soul? This godly soul is part of God. It's a chelik elikami mal mamash. It's part of God, like it says in the lashon chelik elikami mal. Not to the bad, it's mamash. It's a part of God. So you're beseeching God at the time and say, God, this is at this point, it's about you. Because my soul is ultimately a part of you. You got to help me on this one. Alleviate or give me strength that I can overcome that determination of that alien signal which is tormenting me now. And throughout the entire prayer, and he reached even this point, you got to help me because at this point it's about you. It says God will help you at that time. Because in the end, L'man noyas, he's going to do it for his own sake. And this is what he says. Usually, if you just stay, focus on the road, focus on the prayer, you'll see. Like again, if you ignore somebody, that's the easiest way to get rid of him. Don't dignify the person who is bothering you, even if it's a physical person or if it's a negative thought. The moment you'll ignore it, or rather, if you take the stand of ignoring it, it'll dissipate, it'll go away. But Al Rebbe says, what if it doesn't? It becomes extremely difficult because they're tormenting you strong with extra strength. Then yashpil lashes. He says, then do this what we just said we just said orally, but let's see it inside in the text. Yashpil nafshil Hashem. Humble your soul to God. Beseech God. In your mind. In your mind. Literally. Beseech God in your mind. Have mercy on you. With His great mercy. Like the mercy of a father over a child. Especially a child which is in the middle of a battle, in the middle of an important battle and an important conflict. And in this case, why do we put it in the context of Abanim, a father over children? Because the soul comes from the mind of God. Just like a child comes from Meicha'av. The soul comes from Meichai. Makocha, Yirachim, Hashem al nafshe. Hashem will have mercy on his soul. And Imshachas mita, in other words, again, Imshachim Meichi rather, because this is part of the example, that a child comes from the Moacha'av, so too God will have mercy on the soul of the Yid, and Imshachas mita Yisbarach, which comes from him, Latzila, to save it, Mimayim Azidainim, from these waters which are Zaidanim, mean to say these waters are tormenting waters. Uleman noyas, he's going to do for his own sake, for God's sake, because the Jew, Hashem's nation, in this case the Jew who's davening and having the struggle, his soul is part of God. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do for his own sake, because again this is the Shem that comes from him, and alleviate and give the extra strength to the Yid who is davening to alleviate himself from the fierce tormentation of the nefesh, or presentation which is so tormenting of the nefesh bahamis, in order to alleviate it from that strength, and in order to be able to continue davening accordingly and appropriately. Have a great night.